Hi guys, how are you?
Very good. Very good.
So to start, and I am a big old I always said if I had a backbone, I would probably be into detective work because I've always found like serial killers and profiles and things like that so fascinating, but I'm also a little scaredy cat, so I couldn't do it. So your story is one that is so interesting to me because I watched Mindhunter and was like, "Oh, is this a real person?" and then was obsessed when I found out the reality. For you, how is it now getting to have your story come out both in a fictionalized telling and in this true story that like documents everything that happened to you?
Well, do you mean to have Mastermind come out?
Yeah,
And
like have both a fictional
I,
version of what happened to you and now Mastermind.
I'm absolutely delighted that we got to this point. I wasn't sure as we started out, never having done this before. Certainly, it talked about cases and so forth, but
Mhm.
to have it, to have someone like Abby is wonderful. So she knew what she was doing, even though I didn't know what I was doing in putting this together. So I think it's been very rewarding to see that. And hopefully that it does get the whole issue, a rounder picture of the issue out there than just the offender.
Mhm. Yeah, and I was going to ask Abby, one of my least favorite things about kind of the obsession with serial killers is that we focus entirely on the serial killer themselves and not the victims or the people who help stop them. For you as a filmmaker, was it important to have this story come out so we are seeing the people who worked really hard to try and like stop all of these people when these crimes are happening?
You nailed it. Yes. That was something from our early conversations with Dr. Burgess and understanding this was her story. And of course, we wanted to make this, entertaining for a true crime audience and have like the excitement of some of these real cases that she worked on, like the ski mask rapist and Jean Jobert. And however, what was really important was telling the stories of the victims and survivors, was telling the story of nurses, was telling Dr. Burgess's story and really those human elements. And so for me, my interest, I enjoy true crime, but I'm more interested in kind of just that human behavior aspect. And so we just really tried to like sit down and talk to Dr. Burgess and realize like what were the stories that she wanted to tell. And that was really the starting point for the whole series.
Yeah, and I love too because I think, you know, one of my fascinations with things like the movie Zodiac is a comfort movie because it's people who are trying to do their jobs. They might not be succeeding, but they are attempting to succeed. But I do think that is kind of where a lot of people come into true crime is they want to see people figuring something out and doing well. And so Dr. Burgess, when you are kind of now seeing this boom in a true crime obsession, but people also looking to the detectives and the doctors and everyone who figured out what was going on. What for you has been the most kind of overwhelming part of all of that that has been happening in our kind of media right now?
Well, I think we are seeing I've been impressed with the trend that we're seeing, and I think it is to get more of the victims and their families out there. And that's going to help them. It's going to
Mm.
help the trauma aspect in a very implicit way, not as an explicit way, but I think you're going to see a change. I think all for the good in terms of helping the victims' families and so forth. At some of these conferences, they are having the families come in. So they're highlighting it. And I think that's a very positive thing. And
Yeah.
I think that's what the mastermind is going to hopefully the message it will be giving.
Yeah. And Abby, when you are kind of doing uh, a quote unquote true crime documentary, when you have to figure out when to use like flashbacks and have like an actor come in and play Dr. Burgess, like writing at a typewriter and things like that. How do you kind of navigate what real footage you have versus what you use of someone recreating something?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of that that comes into play in the edit. You know,
Hmm.
we filmed most of the interviews and most of the footage and had rough cuts when we decided, okay, here's where we can really enhance it. by bringing in the kind of recreation aspect of the story. And that was kind of a cool part for me because we recreated kind of like a 70s look and an 80s look and a 90s look as we kind of move through the chapters. But it really, we started actually with the book Killer by Design that was that Dr. Burgess wrote with Stephen Constantine. And the book was brought to life through the story so visually through her perspective and her point of view. And so that's really where that idea first started of like, how do we make sure that we can feel like we understand what it's like for Dr. Burgess to go down into the basement of the BSU the first time and bring audiences into kind of her world in an immersive way. So we kind of, drew from those pages of the book and then tried to recreate them along with copying some of Mindhunter's set decorating work. And, they had done the research already. So we kind of took a page out of their book to make sure we got all the props right. Although I have one really quick story about that too, is we were asking about the actual tape recorder. I was trying to talk to Dr. Burgess about it, thinking, how are we going to find the right props? And then she shows up at Boston College with the original one in hand, this like 30-pound tape recorder that she's like, oh yeah, I just had it at home. So it was amazing how much archive, not only in terms of the props and her archive, but we were able to integrate into the whole series.
Oh my God, I love that. Just like, here it is. Here's this iconic piece of history. I'm just going to put it down on the table.
I had no idea that she actually had it. I was just trying to kind of imagine what it looked like, but there it was.
Love it. For last question, we can start with you, Dr. Burgess, and then Abby, if you want to follow up. I think now in retrospect, we can look at everything you did as like, for women in a weird way, being very empowering because you were at the forefront of this and you are the reason that we have these profiles and we have all of these cases. But it is also about you trying to help these victims and help stop these people. Was it ever in your mind to kind of have like, okay, I'm doing this and I'm a woman and I'm putting it at the forefront, or was it always about just stopping these people and kind of making sure that there weren't more victims on the list of their crimes?
Yeah, probably the latter is what I would say, is that when you're going through and doing things and doing your work and so forth, you're not, at least I'm not thinking in the larger picture as or Abby might in trying to conceptualize or contextualize things. So for me to have to now look back has been quite an interesting activity, if you will, to and I've been surprised at things that I never would have thought about or picked up to see from a historical standpoint, actually, what you're doing. When you look at the decades that you have to deal with and trying to put it together, it isn't like, oh, it's just one decade or two. We've got quite a long length of time that we can look at what change and what advances or not have been made. And certainly from the standpoint of helping people. I mean, I'm a nurse. That's basically what we do. We do care and take care of people. So that's the spin I put on, hopefully.
Yeah. And Abby, was it important to kind of show both sides of it? Because it's like, yes, she maybe wasn't thinking in the mindset of, oh, I'm doing this for women in the future, but now we get the benefit of looking back and seeing what she did and how it helped other women.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Dr. Burgess was driven by like a feminist agenda, right? It wasn't about like breaking the ceiling. It was about doing the work. And the behavioral science unit and the FBI, they needed her. It wasn't like they had a, diversity quota where they're like, let's bring women in. She was the one who was the academic. She knew how to analyze the data. She knew how to bring in all of this information and find the patterns. Nobody there had that skill set. So they invited her in because simply they needed her, and she blazed that trail. And as Candace DeLong, she was one of 7 women when she joined the academy, and it was Dr. Burgess who kind of allowed her and to be a role model to kind of make that leap. And she says the reason that Dr. Burgess did what she did is she was always the smartest person in the room. So she was an asset to the FBI, and many women followed in her path, and I think it changed the culture there as well.
Yeah. I can't wait for everyone to get to see this. I think it's such a necessary and fascinating way of looking at kind of the true crime world and how we all kind of take it in. And thank you guys so much for talking with me, and thank you for your work, Dr. Burgess. And yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah.
Great
Thank you. Have a
question.
great day. Thanks.